Okay, and we are live. My name is Grace Gravestock. Welcome to the Know Yourself Revolution live stream and podcast. I am here today with Neil Harrison, an expert in change management and AI, and we are set up for an exciting conversation. So before we get started, please put in the chat, let's see, please put in the chat where you are listening from. I know we have viewers from all over the world. We have people joining us through LinkedIn and also from YouTube. So we also want to take questions. So if you have a question that you want to make sure we cover in the course of our conversation today, then put it in the chat. So without further ado, today we're talking about leading with human intelligence and how is AI changing leadership and change management. So before we get into it, I'd love for you to introduce yourself, Neil. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your background.
Yeah, sure. So, hi, delighted to be here. Thanks for the invite. So my name's Neil Harrison. I'm the founder at the Adaptologists. So we're a consultancy specializing in AI leadership and change management services. So we provide leaders with help and advice around leading in AI and the changes that brings about. We help with them, organizations discover their why for AI, so the AI business cases, and we help with innovation and pilots for AI development as well. So I've been doing that for about a year now, I think. Prior to that, I've worked in global IT consulting companies and boutique consultancies, specializing in change management, typically for digital transformation, but other things. And I've worked as an internal employee and consultant in a number of businesses. So I've lived and worked in the UK, where I am now, the US and Australia.
Wow. So you are also global and you have a global perspective, bring a global perspective. Neil, today, so much is changing and so much is changing fast. And so as change leaders, we have an opportunity to not just adapt, but to really change the questions that people are asking and really lead the conversation. I know that one of the things that I learned when I started my career, and I'll just give a brief, synopsis. I actually started my change management career in the UK. So of all places, I worked for the UK government. Was called in the Office of the Deputy Prime Minister, and it was a very large scale change project that affected all citizens in the UK. So I had a great opportunity to get a big picture perspective. I got to be a spokesperson for this, and then I decided I wanted to move to the California and had an opportunity to meet with the governor at the time, his chief of staff, and he introduced me to quite a few people, and that in 4 days I got to meet with 24 senior leaders in the state of California, and it led to a job offer with Deloitte. So I feel like I've had the opportunity to also have a perspective on change and change management that touches, governments and large organizations, Dell, Deloitte, Warner Brothers, and especially the utility industry. So that's kind of where I'm coming from and where my perspective is. And so one of the things that I learned early on is how important it is to ask the right questions. So we've had a lot of input as we were preparing for this conversation, and I'm going to share a little bit more about that in a minute. But Neil, I'd love for you to share a little bit more about this question and why we want to focus the conversation in this way today.
Yeah, I think that, when we think about change and the challenges that we face in change management, I think there's something about AI that really highlights and accentuates some of those challenges. And there's two words that always come immediately to mind when I think about this. The first is pace, so how quickly AI development is taking place. And the other is uncertainty, so how difficult it is to predict a future with AI. And I think these two things really sort of bring home challenges for how we lead through change in AI in particular. And if we think about digital transformation, traditional digital transformations that we've been doing, 25 years or so, they tend to start from a place of certainty around where we are, so our as-is model. They predict a future state that is not only static, but it ends. When we've delivered and achieved the benefit, that's it. It's a one-time deal, typically, with digital transformation. And we chart a path that's largely linear between the as-is and the to-be future state. But with AI, that's completely changing, I think, the landscape. It is evolving so rapidly. We can't predict a future state. There is no linear path, I don't think. So it starts to introduce some really interesting challenges around how we keep pace with the development and how we manage the uncertainty.
I agree. And I think a big part of it that I want to throw in here for our conversation is that we're talking about a different animal here, of course. AI isn't just another tool. It's literally fundamentally reshaping how we lead change and how we think about change. And so because it's not just like you mentioned, it's not like the old way that we were thinking about change management. It's actually streamlining processes, it's enhancing our data-driven decision making, and it's scaling our impact. And it really raises some critical leadership questions. So as we dive into this conversation, I want to I know we're going to touch on some of these, and there's a lot that we're not going to be able to get to today, but here's some of the key questions that I think that we could be asking, and some of these we will address today. So how is AI redefining the role of change leaders? Where does AI add value, and where should we use caution? How do we embed AI into our processes while still keeping people at the center? I know a lot of people have asked what tools should change leaders be using today. And I know we're not going to get into the specifics of tools much today. That's not the focus of our conversation. We're really going to start to set the context for this conversation about how AI is changing the way we lead change, how AI is influencing culture transformation. And so most importantly, obviously, how do we drive change in not just people? This is actually changing the future of our profession. And so we've had quite a bit of really good input. And so I just want to acknowledge some of the people that have asked some great questions. Manuel Miranda says, where does AI truly help with executing change, and when should we be cautious or avoid it altogether? Sandrine Provost focused on process innovation. She's asking how we can use AI to increase the quality, reduce time on change management activities, and localize communications and workshops. She also raised a strategic question of how might AI drive culture transformations. Larry Powers, I've been involved in ACMP, and I know you have too, Neil.
Yeah.
And so some of these are friends from there. Larry Powers brought up a growing expectation for organizations about AI becoming integral to OCM work streams, and talking about improving messaging, simplifying work, optimizing resources. Ricky Mathis says AI is often seen as a tool for job reduction. So how do we address the real fear that AI could replace change managers?
Yeah.
Doug, just a couple, one more. Doug Flory wanted to ask about how do we move beyond the broad AI discussions and start talking specifically about bots, agentic AI, ChatGPT, and other emerging technologies that impact how we lead change. There's so many things that we could discuss today, and we're not going to be able to get to all of it. But I just wanted to acknowledge that we have a lot of interest in this topic. There's a lot of questions to ask. There's a lot of things to discuss. And the focus today is really, from my perspective, and I think from yours too, Neil, is what questions should we be asking as we lead the change so that we don't get caught up in the minutia before we really look at the bigger picture.
That's quite an interesting range of questions, isn't it? There's quite a wide range of questions, actually. I think it's quite interesting. I don't know where you want to start with that. That's
well, here's the thing, Neil. I mean, we've had so much interest in this
yeah,
topic, and there's a lot to cover, and I don't think we're going to be able to get to all of it today.
yeah,
I would like to do today is really start off with your perspective, being an expert in this space, one of the few experts in this space in both AI and change management, really helping us to think about what are the questions we should be asking as AI is changing our profession. I mean, these are the some fundamental changes. And if we don't ask the right questions, as we all know, if we've used AI, the answers we get depend on the questions we ask, right? So it's really important that we actually ask the right questions. So what
yeah,
are some of the right questions that we can and should ask?
yeah. It's probably just before I get into that, I feel slightly uncomfortable with the title expert because I think this is such an evolving topic that I actually think, we're all learning really, and I think it's important to keep that open mind. And whilst I've been doing this for 18 months or so on AI specifically, I'm learning all the time. So just just a cautionary note there. But I think when you were reading those questions, one of the things that was going through my mind actually was that how we can apply AI in so many different ways and how it can be so highly tailored and personalized makes us, I think, need to stand back and think about, well, actually, what is it we're trying to achieve, first of all? And we can think about AI adoption. I tend to describe it in three different categories. So is it adoption that is in some way going to improve our customer experience? So is it externally focused to improve and perhaps personalize our customer experience of the work we're doing, i.e. in change management case, the organizations that we're supporting? Is it something about improving our internal processes, operations within organizations? Are we helping organizations to become more efficient, for example, reduce costs, streamline processes? Or are we aiming to achieve that efficiency and that greater level of effort available to every individual in the organization? So when we think about some of the basic tools that we'll all have heard of, ChatGPT you mentioned would be a good one. Every person in the organization can benefit from that tool. Everyone can improve their day-to-day working, their day-to-day lives through, removing the mundane, through improving brainstorming, idea generation through that application, if you get the prompts right. And so this introduces, oh, sorry, you're on mute, I think.
Sorry, I just want to highlight what you just said. If you get the prompts right. So the answers we get, depend on the questions we ask. So I want to highlight that. And before you dive into that, Neil, let me just say, I want to acknowledge we've got people from all over the world chiming in. So we've got Lazarus from Kenya, Africa today. We've got, I'm not sure how to say that. Embrace AI with open arms. It will benefit everybody. And MD Shoaib, I'm not sure how to say it. Hillary Scarlett is joining us from London, and we have somebody in Paris as well. So the reason I want to highlight that, Neil, is I want to say thank you to you if you're joining us from somewhere else, from wherever you are. We have people joining us from all over on LinkedIn and YouTube. So keeping that global perspective in mind as we talk, and also again to highlight where you were just going with that. We get to ask the right questions, and those questions are going to determine the answers we get. Okay, and we've got somebody from Chennai, India as well. Oh, here's somebody else from London, Suzanne O'Neill. So wow, we do have a really global audience. So keeping that in mind and knowing that everybody wants to benefit and will benefit, they will find ways to benefit. And that's actually our job as change managers. That's how I see it, to help people embrace the change. I think in order to have them embrace the change, it's important for them to see what's in it for them. So there are people, before we get into too much further down the road, I just want to acknowledge that there are a lot of people right now that have an attitude towards AI. Either they're ones who are wanting to embrace it, or there are folks who are resisting still. And I have to say, I used to be in that camp as well, resisting. So there, but now I'm embracing it. Why? Because I realize that there is no way to avoid it. It is literally changing the fabric of everything that we're doing. I'm just seeing we've got more people joining. Larry in Houston. We've got Jennifer Bryan in London. So yeah, thank you so much for all of you who are joining us wherever you are. Please put your questions, if you have them, or comments in the chat, and I'll try to bring them up as we take a breath throughout this interesting conversation. So Neil, thank you for helping us to revisit that idea. Like, the answer we get depends on the question we ask, and more than anything else, anybody who's used ChatGPT is well aware of how specific that really is, and how true that is. So knowing that, please carry on. I know you have a lot more to say, and I want you to be able to say it.
No, that's great. There's a number of angles we could take here. Let's start with actually every individual in the organization. So I read some stats recently that suggested around 20% of people using AI, across the board, are doing so without the knowledge of the organization that they're working in. And as organizations are sort of trying to get their head around how they want to adopt AI, some organizations are suggesting not to use it. And of course, people will use it because it's so prevalent.
They'll find ways to use it, won't they?
Yeah, and I think that, actually, this gets to one of the first key actions that we ought to be thinking about, and that is responsible AI. How are we using AI in a way that is safe, that is, conscious of the data biases, and ideally trying to remove the data biases.
Is that even possible, Neil?
Yeah, it's not easy, but you can train data in certain ways and on your specific data, as opposed to, the way in which the models are trained today. Is it secure? We all saw the news develop around DeepSeek, for example. Very interesting use case.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so these questions, actually, the guardrails or the responsible AI are probably the first thing that actually organizations and leaders in particular need to put those things in place. Because not only does it reduce potential reputational damage through, customer data through an open system, for example, but actually it also starts to create the psychological safety and the safety within the organization to start experimenting. And I think, AI is really driving a need for me to innovate and to do so safely in ways you described the classic "what's in it for me" question that we all ask ourselves. I think that's absolutely right. And because AI can be so tailored, actually, we each need to discover how we want to use it. So if you are brilliant at drafting communications for your organization, you're not going to use AI for content creation. Why would you?
Well, or you might use it to improve it. I mean, there's so many ways that you could use AI and use the tools. I mean, why wouldn't you? But then when you do, how does that change it? It changes. My unique angle is thinking about frequency and energy. So when you do use AI, it changes sort of the tone and the frequency of your message. So there are other considerations that I think a lot of people don't think about. But the fact of the matter is, it can help you improve almost everything that you're doing. But from what lens? I think that's the question that we need to ask.
And where to start? The question about, I think one of the questions you read was, how should change managers use AI tools, or, for example. My feeling on that is actually it depends who the change manager is. It depends what organization they're working on with. It depends what the change itself is, because it can be so highly personalized that actually everybody is going to want to use it in different ways. So if you struggle with craft and content, or perhaps you're operating in a second language, for example, then actually your need is going to be different from somebody else that has grown up as a loving content creation and is an expert copywriter, for example. And so I think this sort of hyper personalization and how we gain the value from it comes back to at the individual level. Of course, I've mentioned that there are enterprise level change, but at the individual level, we need to just ask ourselves, well, actually, what is it I need help with? What don't I like doing? What am I spending so much time on that is just, boring, frankly? And how can I improve my experience day to day through the application of AI? Is it improving workflow? Am I removing mundane work? Actually, is it helping me brainstorm? Am I getting creative ideas that I couldn't have otherwise got through my interaction? And so for me, at the individual level, it comes down to asking ourselves, well, actually, what do I need it for? What is my why for AI?
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, Neil, because I'm about to launch a book called 3 Secrets to Making Change Fun and Easy, and one of the first questions that one of the secrets, the very first secret is, number one, it's choice, and it's about choosing to participate or not. And so, as change managers, we've all been in that situation where in the first stages, if you're familiar with the ProSci ADCAR methodology, it's awareness, right? And so we get to bring awareness to the change, and we've all been there. If we've led a change effort, you know that you quickly find out as you do your stakeholder analysis the groups that are embracing the change and the groups that are not, and it depends on the in so many cases the leader, the technology, the politics. I mean, there's so many things that affect it. But the number one question, and I think that's what we're starting with, Neil, and that we get to ask ourselves is, on an individual level, as individuals, as change leaders, as people, even just as people, we have to start this before we even think about, me as a change leader or as a content creator, or, you as an executive, or whatever you are, whatever role you play. We get to answer this question: am I on board with using AI? Am I on board with using this technology? And I think that the nature of us being here today, I mean, all of us who are in this conversation have in some way agreed to, like, okay, I'm going to participate at least at some level. And why do I start with that? I mean, it might seem really obvious, but I really want to highlight that as we lead change, as we lead our teams, as we lead ourselves, as we lead whatever it is that we're leading, it starts with choice. The number one thing is, am I going to participate? And then, as my role, am I, as a change, am I, Grace, going to participate in using AI and using these new tools? And then, am I as going to use these tools in my role as, fill in the blank? And then, of course, when you think about it like that, just it's highlighted, like, for everyone who's used ChatGPT, that you'll get the most effective answers from ChatGPT when you ask the question, as a blank, help me create a blank. And so when you give it those parameters, you're going to get the best results. And so anyway, my point is that in order to adopt anything, the first step is choice. And that's the power that we as individuals have, and we can apply that to our organizations, our teams, and our work. So whether we choose to participate or not is the key thing. And I think that's kind of what you're getting at.
Yeah, I think that is part of it. And it certainly, again, I described the potential adoption in different dimensions at the individual, in process or improving customer experience. But there's a lot of fear, I think, still around with this, and the uncertainty, of course, creates fear itself. I think that is one of the other key things I think we need to address. So yes, get the guardrails in place for responsible AI, because it's protecting you and it's creating a sense of safe, you, the organization. and it's creating a sense of safety. But actually, we need to address those other, psychological impacts that people are feeling. I can't think of another technology that generated discussions around job displacement like AI has.
Yeah.
And you see how many, the predictions of how many jobs are going to be replaced, and what certain functions that will never exist in 5 years, and that sort of thing. That, as change leaders, we need to address that head on. And I think to create that safety,
Safety. No, exactly. Yeah. I'm glad you're bringing that up, Neil, because fear, I mean, as we know from leading change efforts, I mean, fear is the number one thing. Fear of change, right? Everybody says to me when I introduce myself on the client site, oh, I hate change, like, who are you? Like, I'm not sure that I want to be involved in this. I hate change. We all seem to hate change, but the fact is we're in a time when change is going to come, it's going to come more and faster. So thank you for bringing that up, the topic of fear. How do we overcome the fear of change? And I think that as we think about that as change leaders and how we've addressed that in the past, in our projects, in our work, it's the same principles, right? But we get to apply it in a new way. I want to just acknowledge a couple of people that have asked questions. So Larry says, how can we utilize AI to improve our ability to deploy OCM work streams? I mean, that's a question we could spend some time on. Someone says, I shifted from resistance 2 years ago to experimenting and now challenging it to get to increase value. Jennifer says, exactly, responsible AI, because we've been using AI for 15 years. Yeah, in some cases, that's certainly true. We don't hate change, we hate being changed. Wow, Jennifer, that's great. Yeah, none of us like to have change forced on us, which is why I wanted to highlight of the 3 secrets to making change fun and easy. From my perspective, the first secret is choice. We get to choose if we're going to participate or not. And so, like Jennifer said, nobody likes to be forced to change. And so I think it's important to highlight that everybody gets to choose how much or how little they are personally going to use AI and these technologies. And of course, they want to be used. We all want them to be used responsibly. But I think that what we're talking about today, Neil, is both on a personal level and on an organizational level. So what else would you want to say about fear, and how do we address that fear, because it's real?
Yeah. So there's a great, I see Hilary Scarlett. If you don't know Hilary has written this brilliant book, in fact, several, about neuroscience and change. I think there's something in understanding that the psychology of change, physiology of change, sorry. And so a guy called David Rock at the Neuro Leadership Institute, he talks about the SCARF model, typically for influence. Actually, I think there's a lot of key hints in the SCARF model that can help with AI. So if we think about, this stands for, so S is status. If we think about AI and the implementation of AI in certain fields, if you were an expert data analyst in one field, an AI comes in and can do that job in seconds where you took weeks, you might feel your status as an expert in a particular function is threatened. So is AI doing a job better than me is going to impact a lot of people, how they feel in terms of their status. So we need to address that. We need to find ways in which we can bring people towards new career development opportunities. Certainty, we've talked, so SCARF, SC, certainty is something we've talked a lot about already. So we're trying to create as much certainty as we can within the realms of, not being able to predict the future. You've just talked about, choice or autonomy, which is the A, SCA, creating that autonomy, allowing people to experiment themselves in safe spaces. So creating the psychological safety that allows people the autonomy to find how AI can support them, what's in it for me, is really important. And I think having those experimentation pilots and things like that can really help with that autonomy and control. And then fairness, we've talked about SCARF, where am I? Relatedness, so do this in groups, learning groups, have pilots of mixed discipline teams. And then fairness, we've talked about data biases. Actually, is it fair, the way that we're using this? Is it, is one team getting more benefit from training than another team? Those sorts of things. So SCARF is a really nice model for helping us manage that potential resistance in AI.
I like that model, Neil, and that's really useful. And I think there are people that could probably benefit from that. Could you just say that just briefly for people who are taking notes, just what each letter and what it stands for again, just briefly?
Yeah, it's SCARF, so it's status, certainty, autonomy, relatedness, so how we relate to others, and fairness. And actually across all of those 5, you can see immediately, probably, if you work with AI, how AI may actually impact each of those 5 things.
And so what is, so that is a methodology for, could you just give a little bit more context for people who are taking notes? What is the way that how they would frame that again?
Well, I use it for managing resistance, or helping to identify where there may be resistance in organizations. I think David Rock's original work was around how to influence people. So how you create that. He talks quite a lot about our brain responding to either, reward or threat, basically. And when we feel or sense a threat, it changes the way in which our brain is operating, and it reduces our, rational cognitive abilities. We become less social. It's prioritizing physical things for fight and flight. That is not a good place to be when you want change. You want that innovation and creativity and all that thing. And so when we feel a sense of reward or there's some value, then actually those cognitive, those social abilities, that creativity, actually it is, much more prevalent in how our brain is operating. So we want people in that space. David Rock argues that those 5 things will help shift people into that more reward than threat, in essence. I'm very conscious that Hillary's here, and I'm sure she'd have something to say
Hillary,
to add to that.
Yeah, if you're, we'd love to. Oh, there she is. So Hillary says, not only do our brains find change difficult, but so often the anticipation of change is even more uncomfortable. Yeah, I think that's a really great point. It's not about the change itself, even. It's about like fear, like, oh no, things are changing, and the uncertainty of change, right? We don't know what exactly is going to change or how it's going to change. And I think you bring up a good point, Neil. There's really no way for us to know exactly how all of this is going to pan out for us personally, professionally. I mean, there's so much uncertainty, right?
Yeah.
And Hillary says I'm nodding away. I'm having some tech glitches. So weird. I don't normally have these tech glitches, but anyway. So Hillary's with us. There's another comment here I want to acknowledge. I think there's a real need to work on what remains stable in the process of change to mitigate the fear of change, especially for those who are the most reluctant. Yeah, absolutely. So here's again why I recommend that we start with the first, what I call the first of the 3 secrets. 1, choose to participate, reminding everyone involved in the change, and we get to start with ourselves first, that we get a choice. Because when we recognize that we have a choice to participate or not, or how fully we want to participate, that helps us to get out of fear and out of that fight or flight mode and into a more creative flow state. Yeah. And that's really where we want to be. And if we're not in that state personally, how are we going to lead with the confidence and the peacefulness that we'll be broadcasting if we are not personally coming from that place?
Yeah, exactly. I think, and actually, so I mentioned right up front, I think there are 2 things that come to mind all the time. And one is around the uncertainty, because that creates all the fear and so on. And the
Mm.
other is pace. So that
Mm.
speed at which the change, AI is developing, both of those things for me, actually, we can address some of that if we think about leadership in a different way. So traditionally, when we think about leaders, we're probably thinking, they set a direction, we go to them for advice, they'll provide that, they'll provide that certainty around what's happening, where we're going, those sorts of things. I don't think that exists with AI, really. I think we can set the, like a North Star for what the organization is trying to achieve. But when it comes to achieving it, particularly with AI, pushing decision-making down as far as you can to, frontline workers and giving them the autonomy, the choice, as you describe, to work out the best way of dealing with those opportunities or those problems that they face. It's got to be the best way to do it, because it's much more adaptable to change as it happens. The more centralized your decision making, the slower you are.
Mm.
So pushing decision making down as far as you can, democratizing change, and empowering people, giving them the autonomy to consider ways in which they can use AI, their teams, their functions, and doing that in ways that's collaborative. So you've got this shared learning, but you've also got diverse perspectives. Actually, those, you've got tech folks in there, you've got business savvy people working together. That's going to be a much better way, I think, of developing opportunities, focusing on why, what's going to take us forward. And then leaders thinking more about, well, are these things, or are all the initiatives that we're leading taking us in broadly the right direction we want to go in? Or are we learning something from those that changes our direction? So I think it's much more, in leadership roles, I would say much more facilitator and supporter. What do you need for your change? What can I get you so that you can enact that change, rather than this is the change we're doing, top-down direction.
It changes. I think what I hear you saying, Neil, is that use this tool, and we're going to call it tool, or this way of being really in the world, way of working, changes the very nature of how we collaborate, how we do things, how we think about things, and it does democratize in a way that nothing else can. And I think that getting down to that individual level, it really takes us to choice on so many different I want to say the level, that's maybe not the right word, so many different levels. So what I mean by that is you mentioned identity. As AI, as people learn, as we learn how to use it, it can do the work that somebody used to do in weeks, in mere seconds. Now, if my identity has been built on my work, like, who am I all of a sudden? Am I chopped liver? I mean, it's an old joke, right? But all of a sudden I become, I don't want to say worthless to the organization, but my skill set can instantly be replaced. And so when we think about the democratization of work, how we do things, how we engage with others, how we collaborate, and we think about our own personal identities, so historically been tied to what we do, then I think this changes the whole nature of how we think about ourselves, or it can. And I think that it's only a matter of time before this will affect all of us, actually. So
yeah.
Before we get too far down the road, Neil, let me just share. So we've got some other comments here. I just want to acknowledge them. So we've got Larry Powers. He says, when the forces to change become greater than the forces to remain the same, change will happen. Yeah, I think that that's true for AI, and we could even talk about agentic AI, changing the very nature of change and how it happens in a democratized way, in a very personalized way. Cyril, thank you, Cyril. Cyril says, I don't know why my name doesn't show up. Cyril, just to have a face with the name, thank you. And I think that might be Cyril that says reflective autonomy. Yeah, that's a really good term to think about. And I think this is, Cyril, yes, I think AI will expand uncertainty, biases, complexity, hence our need to think about how to collaborate between human intelligence and AI. Yeah, so it really brings to light this conversation, uncertainty, biases, complexity. How do we collaborate? You mentioned a democratization, Neil, between the people in our team, the people that we used to collaborate with, the ones that we'd throw the work over the over the fence to, maybe in some cases. But now we're collaborating not just with those people in a different way. We're collaborating with a new player, which is this AI intelligence. And I think that changes so much.
I think there's some big societal questions coming, I think, about this, because AI can take away a lot of that, in many instances, some entry-level work, let's say. How are people going to really cut their teeth and learn the trade if actually we allow AI to take on much of that work? We will lose the ability to enter into a profession and learn and grow through experience, building our knowledge and building our capability. So when we are implementing AI, we need to be thinking about long-term implications of what we're doing as well. If actually what is driving us is a desire to reduce costs through headcount reduction, for example, I think that is a very short-term view of the world, because actually the value that we can get through that augmentation, or the human AI collaboration, however you want to describe it, actually we can, if we're designing that with freeing people's time for more value add work, so for greater if I'm in a customer facing role and AI is doing a lot of that sort of mundane responses or common responses to customers, this frees me to allow for a much richer engagement with customers. So improving customer experience through creating more time for me as a human to human interaction. And this is true across the business as well, of course. Now, we need to choose in our design of how we're implementing AI, whether we're driven by that, improved customer experiences, better value work for employees, because if I'm not doing a lot of the work I don't like doing, I'm going to enjoy work more, so I'm less likely to leave. There's some big questions there around, are we framing it in the context of improving people's lives? Or are we framing it in terms of reducing cost? And I think the latter is short term.
Yeah, short-term thinking versus long-term thinking, right? And I think it also depends on who you are as a leader. How are you leading yourself, and how are you leading your organization? And so the questions you ask determine the answers that you get. And if you're thinking in the short term, and if you're looking at just profits, then it's going to be easy. I mean, I have to say, as I'm hearing you talk, Neil, I'm thinking to myself, yeah, that would be the answer. That would be the way that we would frame it, is we can do more value add, but how many of us are working in organizations where the leaders are really thinking about that? They're mostly thinking about cost, because they have shareholders, they have they have a focus, historically, a focus on cost. So even though we might say that in the short term, I think we've all seen it already. Friends that we know, or it's maybe affected us. It's affected me in terms of the work that I see and don't see. The way things are changing already. The job market, it's changing. I know that I live in Austin, Texas, and just a couple years ago, this used to be in the top 3 places to move in the whole, I'm going to say the country. And that is now in a list of the top 3 places people are moving away from. Why? Because of the job losses. A lot of it's been a tech hub. And so as people change, as this becomes more prevalent AI use, in organizations, and leaders find ways to cut costs and to minimize and make things more efficient, then I think it really brings up the issue of I really want to get back to this identity. Who are we? Who
Yeah.
are you when you lose your job? Who are you when, even us as change managers, our work is different. I'm seeing a lot of difference in the market. So I think that this is something that we can't step over.
Yeah. I mean, I say, I think these are big societal, questions, really. They go beyond what we might decide to do in business, of course. But whilst there are jobs inevitably and rightly, I think, that will disappear with AI, there's also jobs being created. So I read the other day, 133 million jobs will be created because of AI by 2030. So actually, whilst we might be reducing headcount on particular tasks, what are the new jobs we need to create for the future? So what does job design look like? How are we developing organizations to actually maximize what we can get with that working with AI? So, when we think about benefit in change management, there's a distinction between the outcome and the benefit. So an outcome might be to reduce headcount. The benefit is what we decide to do with that saving. So the outcome might be we reduce how much effort is required. The benefit could be we save money because we can reduce headcount. Or it might be actually with that saving that we've created, we're going to invest in exploring new value propositions for our customers, which would generate growth with the current headcount that we got, for example. I think these kind of business decisions are going to make or break the employee experience in organizations and the EVP that organizations are offering for new hires.
That's a really great point, Neil. I'm so glad you brought it up because, we started with fear, and there's a lot of fear around AI and how it's going to affect work and business and opportunities and all that. And I think it's really important to highlight the new opportunities that it creates. Over the last year, have done a webinar called "Why Your Next Job Has No Job Description," and it was really popular. And I was doing that webinar a lot with job clubs. And the reason that what I anticipate is that the work that is in the future that's going to be available is we can't even imagine what it is now, because even in 6 months' time, this conversation is going to be a moot because it will change. I mean, even by next week, like even just in the last week, the things that I've been learning about agentic AI and deeply personalized results that people are looking for, and how does that drive customer expectations, products and services. I mean, there's so many things changing. So I really want to highlight this idea that with change, yes, comes loss of old things that no longer serve us, the meaning old ways of living, working, and being. I believe I might own the hashtag new ways of living, working, and being, because I am a change advocate. And this is an example, like the new jobs that are going to become available. We get to dream up what we want to do, and we get to reimagine the kind of work that we could create to create value for others in a way that we never were able to before. So it's actually very exciting. And so when we think like that, we can easily step out of fear and into excitement, even while in the midst of so much uncertainty. I think that's a possibility that I'm choosing today. And that's my encouragement to you, if you're listening from wherever you are, is that like, let's focus on the opportunity. And of course, we're realistic. We know that there's fear. We know that there's change. We know there may be loss, but there's also growth and opportunity, like you said, Neil. So thank you for highlighting that. So I don't know if you have something more you want to add, Neil. Let me just add, Suzanne has given us, we've got a couple comments I want to read. So Suzanne says we're working with a lot of business rolling out Copilot. When we asked what they want from Copilot, most of them are looking at employee well-being rather than reducing staff. That's so interesting, Suzanne. Wow. So I think it's easy to jump into assuming that that the bias in corporate America is going to be away from employee well-being. But I think my sense, intuitive sense, is that the organizations that are going to thrive in with these new ways are going to be the ones that embrace employee well-being, because there's a lot that AI can't do that humans can. Let's see, here's Cyril again. He says, I do agree with Neil. Organizations will have to think about how to redefine roles in the value chain. Maybe this needs to be explained in that way. Yeah, read the definition of roles in the value chain. This certainly gives us an opportunity to redefine a lot of things. And then lastly, yeah, I think this must be Cyril. I need to jump off. Great content. Neil and Grace, thank you for putting this together. Yeah, you're welcome, Cyril. Thanks for all of you who are joining. I know we've got about 7 minutes left, and so we're going to do a little bit of a wrap up and kind of a reflection, like where do we go from here, Neil? We've had a lot of great comments. We know there's interest from around the world in this topic. How do we lead with human intelligence? How is AI changing the way we lead our lives, our businesses, and our change efforts? How is AI changing change leadership? Is the question that we're focused on. So as we wrap up, Neil, what are some of the questions or takeaways that you would recommend for our listeners?
I think this one of the things that strikes me is quite important in that typically, so my background is in digital transformation. So in that context, typically we think about change as a one-off activity, or we think about change in a well-defined scope, right? So, we had this sort of allergy of scope creep and all the rest of it, and we would define that scope very specifically. I think with AI, we need to think about scope in terms of the tools that we're implementing in order to achieve an outcome. But actually, if we don't address the wider cultural, organizational design, role design aspects of this, being clear about our ethical and moral drivers for that change as it relates to each organization, we're missing a trick. I think we need to think beyond project. We need to think bigger about how we create the right foundations and the right environment for organizations to be adaptable, to be, creating that safe space so that people have the autonomy to learn and grow and develop and, think about leadership roles in different ways. It goes beyond, basically delivering a tool.
Absolutely. Yeah, it gives us the opportunity to really rethink a lot of things. And I think one of them is the questions that we're asking. We can ask bigger questions. We can solve bigger challenges now. We have new tools that allow us to do more with less. And so when we think about these changes and how much fear people are in, a lot of people are in, because of change, period, just change, the fact that it is change, I think we get to be the leaders that cast a vision of hope and possibility and potential for humanity, because we can solve bigger problems now that we have these amazing bigger tools. And it's just like anything. I mean, I used to sell Cutco knives, so this analogy comes to mind. You have a knife, there's a lot of things you can do with it, right? I mean, some of you heard my story. When I left my marriage, the reason was the ex put a knife to my neck. So in that case, the knife was it symbolized threat, and I had to leave in a hurry. So I've been through a lot of personal change as well. But a knife can just as easily make a delicious meal, right? And it's a tool, just like AI is a tool. And so when we think about all the things that we can do with this amazing tool, let's think bigger. Let's think as leaders. Let's think about the questions that we want to ask. Let's think about who we get to be to have the impact in the world that we want to have. When I left my last project about 1.5 years ago, it was really successful. I wrote a white paper on it. My leader got acknowledged as Utility Leader of the Year in CS Week. Some of you know what that is, Customer Service Week. And it was an amazing project with a lot of amazing people. I left that work to set up an infrastructure that I believe will help a lot of people when their work goes away. It's sort of a personal assessment tool that helps you know what you're uniquely configured to be and do. And so, I'm going to share that link in a minute. But Neil, I know you have an offering as well, and so as you've really added a lot of value here as a thought leader. I appreciate your presence. I appreciate your thought leadership here. And so, what if somebody wants to go further with you? What would you want them to do? How can they reach out to you?
Yeah, in fact, I'll just share my screen. So we covered quite a lot of ground here. First of all, for further learning, because I think it's important that we as a community have a lot of the skills that's going to make the world a better place through our leading change. In the document, so the QR code on the left-hand side, if this is that sharing on the screen. I've put together a sort of a strategic guide. Whilst it's aimed at UK businesses, it's relevant beyond that. So this guide talks about some of the applications of AI, by sector. It covers the SCARF model actually and how that relates to AI, and a few other things in there. An approach a framework for adopting AI, so a 4P framework that I describe in that document. That's free for access there. Please do take a look at that, and hopefully that's useful to you. And then give me a follow. I'm posting daily on LinkedIn. That's the QR code on the right.
There we go. Yeah. So if you'd like to know more about Neil, if you'd like to follow him, he does. Thank you, Neil, for creating so much great content, engaging. I know you have a huge following, and you are acting as a thought leader in this space, and we appreciate that. Everybody, at this time with so much change, it's helpful to have somebody like you that's following the trends and following the what's going on and offering intelligent conversation and input and insights to help guide this conversation. So thank you so much for that. I will say that if for me, I lead this effort called the Know Yourself Revolution. If you know somebody who has had a job loss, if you're working with groups of people that you want to redeploy for whatever reason in ways that leverage their unique strengths, I have a personal assessment tool that's very effective. I've used it with hundreds of people now, and I want to do more work with organizations who are in a change and want to use the intelligence and the capacity that they have with their teams in a new way. So if you can get your personal free chart and find out what work you're uniquely configured for at whatsmychart.com. And that is, if you're on an iPhone, you'll want to put https:// before that. Sometimes the browser doesn't pick it up without that. So that's it. Thank you so much for being here, Neil. I think we're just about out of time. It looks like we've had so much interest in this. We might do some follow-on conversations. I'll close with this last comment. I love this idea you, Neil, mentioned with benefit versus outcome. I think there's a lot, but maybe we need to make sure we use it to support and improve our why. Yeah, why is such a key, important question. Why are we doing what we're doing? Asking the right questions is going to lead us to asking better questions. There's no right or wrong, good or bad, as far as I'm concerned. It's just different. We're going to have a different experience. And as you know, if you type in a different question, you're going to get a different response from ChatGPT. It's similar like that in life on so many levels. So thank you for a great conversation, Neil. Is there any last words you would like to leave with our viewers?
No, but thank you very much for the invite. It's great questions and input there from everyone. So thanks.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here. And if you're interested in future conversations, reach out to Neil and we may do more. I feel like there's a lot we could cover if we had more time. So thanks so much. Have a great day.
Thank you.